feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road.
Oh, and a couple of tra-la-las. That's how we laugh a day away in the very Orlando bars.
Meeting of the $13 Club. I'm glad to see you all here, including our guests, Larry and everybody. We're also privileged to have a special speaker today, a guy who's in a good business at the minute. I think things are doing pretty good. We're ready for a good 15-year mortgage at about 4.66. That's too high. Okay, look at that. If you tell him who you are, you saw him here, he'll give you a discount. And it's a contingent from West Milford and Brother Wenzel, okay? Bob is a member of West Caldwell Rotary.
I'm former president of West Caldwell.
West Caldwell Rotary. Some people call it West Caldwell. West Caldwell. Okay. Also a resident of the Packanack Lake section of our town. Packanack Lake is right up the street here. You all know what that is. Founded in 1928. Good country club and all that kind of stuff. But Bob is also a good collector. Tommy's also a collector. Bob's, I see Jay Schwartz out there, too loud. He's a collector of anything that stands still, politically speaking. And this is a sample of what it is. Also a vendor of it. If you want to make an offer on it, you can either eBay or you can make an offer here today, even orally. But would you tell us a little bit about why people collect, what they collect, how is it good for us? And I see you're reading a new book there called The Wizard of Oz.
A book called The Wizard of Oz.
Wow.
Because when I'm here to tell you, I'll start off with collecting political memorabilia, which is something I started doing when I was 12 years old. And I remember I started collecting buttons, and I think my allowance at the time was $5 a week. And I got a book on collecting buttons, and I went to an antique show and found a button, $10 they asked for, Harding Coolidge Club of Bloomfield, New Jersey. And I looked in the book, and it wasn't in the book. And being a good negotiator I was, I bargained it down to $8, came home, bought the button for $8, showed it to my father, and he said, "You schmuck. I give you $5 a week allowance. You spent $8 on a lousy button." 3 weeks later, I went to my first button convention. Like baseball card shows, antique shows, everybody was selling buttons. I walked in, everybody wanted to know what I had. I had Harding Coolidge Club of Bloomfield. I sold that button for $881. When my father picked me up 3 hours later, he said, "You schmuck, you should have gotten $1,000. You just can't win. The funny thing was, having sold that button, I always regretted it. If you look in the bottom case at the top, you will see I just picked up another Harding Coolidge Club of Bloomfield, New Jersey button. It just cost me $3,800. Of course, the first one I sold was back in 1974. Buttons came out. Political memorabilia started with the Andrew Jackson election back in the 1840s. But nothing became big until 1896 was the first election where they had celluloid buttons. And one of the big tie-ins to celluloid buttons were, they were made by a company called Whitehead and Hogan, Newark, New Jersey. So almost all of the buttons in the early elections came from New Jersey. If you look at my collection, everything there is Jersey related. My collection of New Jersey related political memorabilia is bigger than the State Historical Society. Some of the things you'll see in there are Bob Meyer's actual badge to the Democratic National Convention in 1956, and some other personal items belonging to governors. But the interesting thing that Tom and I were talking about, which he thought I should speak about when I met him for lunch a few weeks ago, has to do with political elections in this book, The Wizard of Oz. How many here have seen the movie? Has anybody ever read the book? Do you know that there's one big difference between the book and the movie? No. There are no ruby red slippers.
They were sold at the auction a while ago.
They weren't sold
on eBay.
And the ruby red ones were, but the Witch of the East was proud of those silver shoes. Now, I know some of you may be historians and know this story of this book was written in April of 1900, right before the presidential election between William Jennings Bryan and William McKinley, which was a repeat of the 1896 election. The 1896 election was fought the difference between the gold standard and the silver standard, where you might want to know the Wizard of Oz. Oz is in ounce. Follow the yellow brick road with the gold standards. And what was it that brought Dorothy back? Silver slippers. All of the characters in the Wizard of Oz mean something in a political allegory. Dorothy was everyman. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've never been able to figure out who Toto was. But Dorothy was everyman. The Scarecrow represented the farmers. The Tin Woodsman represented industry. The Cowardly Lion was William Jennings Bryan, the great orator, whose bark was worse than his bite. The Wizard was the President, McKinley, who did everything with smoke and mirrors. Because remember, L. Frank Baum was a populist. He wanted William Jennings Bryan to win, so it was the Silver Slippers who brought her back. The Wicked Witch of the East was industry, and all the industry in the East. So this book is nothing but a political allegory, and really had nothing to do with being a fairy tale. So that's that relationship. With the political items, there are many items. Somebody asked me about values before. Values are, it's all supply and demand. If I gave you an idea, the items in those two cases are probably worth in excess of 6 figures. That would be conservative. The values are based on rarity, single-day events. Even one of the better buttons from the last election is a Passaic County for Giuliani button, Passaic County for Rudy button that someone who left here early had produced for an event.
Susan.
Yeah, right. And those were selling at one point in time for about $20 to $25 on eBay, even though you all donated your dollar to Susan. Does anybody have any questions?
What's your most valuable button in here?
Oh, you said in here. No. My most valuable button that I have a one-of-a-kind inauguration of Woodrow Wilson as governor of New Jersey button with the ribbon from the president of the Woodrow Wilson Democratic Club. Now, I will tell you, it was at an auction in New York. It was at a coin auction, so a lot of people didn't find it. I went there with my son. I sat there for 6 hours. And and Bob knows my wife. My wife wasn't very happy because I went with $11,000 in my pocket. And when I told her that I was happy because, we got there and we sat for 6 hours and nobody who collects political stuff comes in. 10 minutes before this button goes up, one of the biggest political dealers in the hobby walks in. And I, of course, had an expletive reaction that I was a little upset, but he knew that I wasn't going to stop on this button, so he was very good. So when it hit $2,400, and I just stood there like this, with no intention of backing down, he backed down. Then I called my wife and told her I spent $11,000 on the button.
Aren't you forgetting the ruby slippers?